All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Candace Mosley, Director of Programs for the National District Attorneys Association, and I want to welcome all of you to this first in a two-part series. And we are really excited here at NDAA. There's over 180 of you who have registered for this webinar. We're so excited you're here to join us. It is a little bit afternoon here on the East Coast, and it's a bright sunny day out. I hope wherever you are in the country, you're having the same type of experience. I know it's still morning for those of you who are out on the West Coast. So welcome and welcome. NDAA, we are so pleased and excited to actually partner with the National Nonprofit for the People. We are so excited to share with you what is becoming a really emerging area of law, and that is Prosecutor-Initiated Resentencing, or PIR. We're just delighted to have this partnership, and just want you to know that For the People has actually started this innovation about 2018. And they really started having an opportunity for prosecutors to find a way to look at already sentenced cases and to look at those past sentences and make some decisions, some critical decisions as to whether or not further incarceration was actually going to be in the interest of justice. So now we've got prosecutors all over the country that have actually enacted this legislation in their communities. They've implemented PIR. And what's really interesting and great is that with close to 500 people being released, and then there are hundreds of more cases all over the country that are being considered and looked at right now. I am going to ask that we're going to move the slide up and just cover just a bit of housekeeping. Be sure that we're all on the same page with what we're going to be doing today. So just going through the housekeeping. Now, I know that many of you are zoomed out. You don't need to know anything else about this Zoom platform, but just for those who might not have been on a webinar in the last 2.5 years, let me cover this. All of your microphones are actually automatically muted. We are in the Zoom webinar, not in the meeting, so you are automatically muted. So you don't have to worry if you're at home and you're working remotely or you're in your office that we can't hear what's going on. So go ahead and do what you need to do to be able to take part in this training. Please submit your questions using the Q&A or the chat feature. There are staff that are going to be monitoring that, and they'll be able to actually answer you, respond to you while we are going through the webinar. If you've got questions, go ahead and lift them up. Don't worry about holding them. That way we'll have them and we'll know when we're ready to answer. Now, the webinar is being recorded. It's going to be made available for on demand following this live session, because we know that there's some people who may not be able to hop on here, and we want to be sure everybody gets this great information. Okay. CLE. This course has been approved for an hour-and-a-half of CLE credits in Kansas, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Illinois, and Texas. Credit is still pending in Mississippi, Ohio, and Virginia. This is for people, and next, this is for people who are attorneys who are going to be watching us. So attorneys who are from any of these other states, we do encourage that you contact your state bar or your CLE office for more information with regards to what requirements, what documentation you may need to submit in order to get CLE for this live webinar. We are asking everyone to please complete the evaluation survey. We realize that we have a multidisciplinary audience here, and that is wonderful. You will be getting a certificate. For those of us who are attorneys, it's a CLE uniform certificate for attendance that'll be emailed after the webinar. You would submit that to your state bars. If you are attendees who are from other disciplines, feel free to utilize that as well to submit to your reporting authority. All attorneys, we're all responsible for any fees associated with your CLE filing. And if you've got any questions, we've got the best person here to answer that. That is Courtney Jan. Courtney is for NDAA. She manages all the CLE on all of our trainings. And that's her email address, cjan@ndajustice.org. Any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask her about that. And we've covered for non-attorneys. So we're going to go to the next slide. All right, additional learning opportunities. Please know that NDAA is offering several virtual and in-person learning opportunities in 2022. I want you to please visit ndaa.org for our 2022 course offerings and our eligibility. We have some trainings that are designed specifically for prosecutors and those associated with prosecutors' offices, but we've got many trainings that are multidisciplinary in nature, just like this audience. So we just say when you look, just look at the eligibility paragraph, and then you can also email either one of the program directors that are on that particular course and ask questions. We have a limited number of tuition scholarships available for both of our virtual and our in-person courses. Did everybody hear that? Yes, there is such a thing as a free lunch. So just so you know, you have to be an NDA member to apply. If you got any questions, this is our Director of Marketing and Membership. This is her email address. Her name is Lauren Collins. So lcollins@ndajustice.org, and she can give you any answers to questions with regard to memberships. Next, please. I want to give you just a little bit of information with regard to the three panelists that we have that are going to be joining us today. First of all, I would like to let you know that the organization's founder and executive director, Hillary Blout, will be facilitating today's conversation. Please know that in 2018, Hillary wrote the first law in the country allowing prosecutors to look back at cases for potential resentencing. And this was AB 2942 in California. Now she's helping ensure implementation by working closely with district attorneys' offices, including California, North Carolina, Louisiana, Washington, Oregon, and many, many more. We are also glad to be joined by District Attorney Jeff Reisig and Jose Duran today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about DA Reisig. District Attorney Jeff Reisig is here to discuss his experience implementing prosecutor-initiated resentencing in the smaller rural county of Yolo, California. DA Reisig was one of the first in California to begin doing resentencing work, and he has prosecuted thousands of cases during his more than 15 years as the elected district attorney, more than 26 years as a prosecutor, and more than 15 years as the elected. I am also very pleased to introduce Mr. Jose Duran, who was released through PIR, and he will share a bit about his journey being resentenced and coming home to his community. We will learn more details about his experience a little bit later on in the webinar. Now what I'm going to do is pass this over to Hillary. And just to let you know, Hillary is going to use a slide presentation, and she's going to walk you through an overview of PIR, what it is, some of the different elements to PIR. And then she's going to moderate a conversation with both DA Reisig and with Jose Duran, so they can just share their personal experiences with PIR. So this is just wonderful for us. Hillary, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Thank you all for joining us. And Hillary, good morning in your neck of the woods and good afternoon here.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that intro, Candace. Well, welcome everybody to the first of two webinars. We are obviously really thrilled and honored that the NDAA has invited us to host this two-part series. The first, which is today, which is the why. Why are prosecutors and counties beginning to do this work? And then we're going to be back on September 28th, as you see here on the slide, to get into the how. How are offices doing this work? How are states passing this legislation? And how are people reuniting with their families and their communities? And so as a former prosecutor myself, as Candace said, I really recognize how hard we are all working in trying to strike this balance, right? This job that we have, which is to balance the equities of keeping our community safe, but also bringing in new types of innovations and new types of reforms into our office, right? And so it is a difficult but necessary balance that we are trying to strike. And so we hope that in sharing with you a bit about prosecutor-initiated resentencing, you'll see this as a tool that you can use to be, again, sort of continuing on in striking this balance in many of your offices. Okay, but before I tell you about prosecutor-initiated resentencing, we wanted to start with giving you some context, a little bit about how this work originated and why many prosecutors are beginning to do this work. So we're going to start with what we have here. Many of you have heard this term, probably mass incarceration, over incarceration, or the need for alternatives, ATIs, alternatives to incarceration. And so we wanted to begin this and ground ourselves in this concept, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and why there has been such a focus by practitioners and lawmakers and community leaders in academia, and now more and more prosecutors really turning and tuning into this concept and trying to figure out what role, if any, should prosecutors play. So again, what we know, what studies have shown and what statistics show us is that the US is the global leader in incarceration. We are 4% of the world's population, but we are 20% of the world's prison population. And 70% of cases in this country result in incarceration, right? And 1 in 7 family members in this country have a person, an immediate family member who is incarcerated. And the statistics go on just to really illustrate how far reach the criminal justice system has and how much incarceration has historically been used as a way to keep us safe. Turning here to this slide, you can see that the way that we became this kind of global leader in using incarceration is that it has been a sort of steady focus on incarceration as the way and the means to keep us safe. And many prosecutors that are tuning in right now remember when laws were passed. Voters had voted to have prosecutors take a tough on crime approach. And so in the 80s, we saw a 127% increase in our prison population. In the 90s, we saw an 88%, in the early 2000s, a 15%. And then just over the last 10 years, we've seen a bit of a decline. But when you look at the kind of arc of this, you see it's a pretty modest decline in comparison to what we were doing in the early 80s and the early 90s. And the last thing that I'll say about this is that, you know, as prosecutors, as I mentioned, I was a prosecutor for several years, right? We all recognize that for many of our offices, the criminal justice system is the kind of last stop, right? It is the catch-all for a lot of other systems that have failed, right? And so the question is, what responsibility or obligation do prosecutors have? We did not cause the poverty structures or the failed school systems or homelessness, but we also are having people come into the criminal justice system with a lot of these issues, right? And so it begs the question about what role do prosecutors have to play? And so we all know this, but I think it bears repeating that people coming into the justice system are disproportionately poor. Studies show that people that are coming into prison or jail are about half of the median income of those who are not coming into the justice system. Racial disparities in this country are hitting Black Americans the hardest. Black Americans make up 12% of the general population, but 38% of the prison population. And for those of us that have prosecuted cases, whether you're you're a defense attorney, and we've reviewed cases, we've reviewed people's backgrounds, we know that so many people that are coming into the justice system were crime victims themselves, experienced homelessness, have incarcerated parents, were arrested at a very young age for the very first time, and or struggle with substance use disorder. And lastly, we know that suicide is rampant in our jails. It's actually the most common reason that people die in jail. And so we know that people are coming to the justice system with a lot of mental health issues, right? And then the justice system is not designed to treat and support all of these things, but it is where people end up, right? And so again, it begs the question, what role, if any, do prosecutors play in knowing all of this? And then just to leave you with some key numbers, today there are about 1.9 million people who are confined, incarcerated, jails, prisons, and so forth. About 5.7 million people who are under some type of correctional control, supervision, ankle monitors, parole, probation, and over $80 billion are spent each year to protect our communities and to keep us safe. And so many of you out there who are working in DA offices are looking at this and have been thinking about this and have asked the question, is the money that we're spending the best way to keep our communities safe? And is incarceration this sort of only strategy or the best strategy to keep our communities safe? And many prosecutors across this country are beginning to think about new initiatives, new innovations, new reforms to be able to better answer this question. So as many of you know, if you've been prosecuting cases for 5, 10, 20 years or been involved in the criminal justice system as a practitioner, you're familiar, you know now today that a lot of you are treating cases differently than you might have when you first began as a prosecutor. There are alternative courts. Perhaps there's a way that young people coming into the justice system are treated differently. People with mental health and substance use disorders are being treated a bit differently. And so while there has been these innovations that are happening on the front end, conviction integrity units are something that we've seen on the back end, right? But very few prosecutors have been involved in some of these back end, as we call them, back end reforms until now. Right. And so that's what we want to talk about today. We're all familiar with some of the front end reforms that have been happening. You might have been leading these reforms in your jurisdictions. And now we're talking about some of the back end reforms that more and more prosecutors, as Candace said, have become more involved with. And that is prosecutor-initiated resentencing. So we're going to talk about this now. And as Candace said, we have two panelists that are going to tell us more about the why, right? Jose is going to illustrate the why that we do this work. And DA Reisig is going to talk about the why in him leading this initiative as one of the primary offices here in California. So why prosecutors? Well, you know, as you can see here, and as we all know, prosecutors occupy a very unique position in the justice system, right? They interact with the court, with community leaders, with defendants, with legislators. They play a very critical role in the justice system. And so it was my opinion and my belief that because there is so much power that prosecutors have, that it is our job and our responsibility to be always thinking about ways that we can be improving the justice system, right? We all know that it is not operating that to keep everybody safe with every equity. We know that there is harm that is caused even with the decisions that are made in an effort to keep us safe. And so I really believed that it was a prosecutor's obligation to try to be involved in figuring out what kinds of innovations could help us keep us safer and also have more fair outcomes. So in my mind, the problem was that there are thousands of people that are currently serving a prison sentence who could be safely released, right? Again, thinking about work on the back end. All of these innovations had been happening on the front end. We have new laws that have been passed. We have new sentencing practices that are happening in many of your offices, new things happening on the front end. But there were several people that were in prison that weren't getting the benefit of this new thinking, people that didn't have an opportunity to take a drug rehabilitation program or some kind of a diversion program, right? And I personally had gone and visited people in prison and did tours inside the prisons, and I was able to meet all of these people who it was clear that they had really transformed their life, right? And so this was a fact that was very clear to me. The other thing that we heard, that I heard, is that prosecutors were receiving requests to review cases, right? We had been working with people in offices that were launching or expanding or improving their conviction integrity units or conviction review units. And one of the things that we continued to hear was that they're getting requests from people that it wasn't a wrongful case, it wasn't an innocence case, but it was simply a case where somebody was serving a sentence where the sentence was just completely out of line with what kinds of sentences people were receiving today. So this was something that we were hearing, but there was no legal mechanism. There was no interest of justice statute, right? There was no mechanism if a prosecutor did want to be responsive to those kinds of requests. And then also, I know that today we have people that are joining. It's not just prosecutors, and this is thank you to NDAA for opening this up, right, to all who wanted to join and learn more about this emerging area of law. But for the prosecutors that are on this call, right, we all know that there are people that we have prosecuted, cases that we have handled, and we think about those cases, and we think about whether it was a time when we were first starting out and we were more aggressive, less willing to work in partnership with the public defender's office, or there was somebody that was offered a plea deal and decided to go to trial and got a really high penalty. And so prosecutors, and at least everyone that I talked to, agreed that there are people that they'd prosecuted that they wondered how they were doing, right? And so this was what we were learning in talking to prosecutors when I first began to think about what role could prosecutors play on the back end. And so this was the big idea. What would it look like to give prosecutors the power to look back at past sentences, right? Reevaluate whether this sentence should stand or whether a person could be safely released. What would it look like for prosecutors to have the ability to reunite families and reunite communities, right? Our job is public safety, and we know that strong families and strong communities and reuniting families and reuniting the fabric of communities does equal safety, right? So this was the big idea. And so I went around and I talked to everybody. I talked to prosecutors. DA Reisig is one of the people that I went to early on, advocates, lawmakers, defense attorneys, folks from academia, to get a sense of how a law like this could work. And so we drafted this law. We were able to get it passed in 2018. And as Candace said, this is a law that allows prosecutors to be able to reevaluate and then recommend people to the court to be resentenced and then released. And I had a lot of confidence that there would be several prosecutors that would be working on this. And I obviously knew that there were a lot of people in prison that could be safely released. But I also knew that passing a law is the easier part than actually implementing it. And so I felt compelled. I had conceptualized this idea. I had talked to people about passing this. I had talked to people about the opportunity. And so I felt that it was important to support the implementation of this law. I didn't know then what I know now, which was I thought I was just going to be starting and helping a couple offices to launch these units in the state of California. But as Candace said, and we'll talk about a little bit, it has expanded far beyond a couple counties in California. We will be coming back to talk on the 28th of September, and we'll get into the weeds and the details of the how. But I did just want to leave you with this also as a teaser, so you'll come back, that these are the pillars of the work that we do. And this is how we support counties, jurisdictions, and states. So we support policy and advocacy work in passing laws. We do site-specific engagement with DA offices and partnering with them to train prosecutors and also community members to launch these collaborative initiatives in their counties. We provide communication support to DA offices and public information officers, and also elevate these redemption stories. And then last but certainly not least, we support incarcerated people and their families who are under the review process by a DA to go through the reevaluation, resentencing, and release process, and then also connect them with resources so that they can be successful on their reentry journey. Again, I won't go too much into this, but these are just some, again, little snippets of what we do. We have resources for drafting legislation. We help with some of that drafting or analyzing legislative language, helping to get prison data to be able to understand what the opportunities are in certain jurisdictions. We do these short-term partnerships, as I mentioned. We also have been supporting some places to identify existing legal vehicles. They may not be as broad, they might be more narrow, but perhaps a state is not able to, or passing a law is not viable, but there are some laws that are available that DAs can use to reevaluate past cases. We do trainings on all of this work, and we also help to engage partners, right? Building some of these bridges and partnerships between stakeholders in the justice system, right? And we all know that the system is designed to be adversarial, right? But there are ways that actors in the justice system can be working together, especially on this type of work. And when we get into the how, we'll tell you how it's been working in a very collaborative and sometimes surprising a lot of the parties, but in a very collaborative way. I would be remiss if I didn't plug our report that we produced. We'll drop it in the chat, and we can also send this out to people who have registered for today. But this report is basically a 3-year review of the work specifically in California. It highlights case studies of people who have been resentenced and gone through this process. It also has a lot of key findings, but some of them that I wanted to mention is that, one, it has shown the opportunity that exists to look back and reevaluate past cases and bring people home that don't need to be there. It has served as an opportunity to address racial disparities. Here in California, 80% of the prison population are people of color. So it provides an opportunity to do this racial justice work that many offices are also interested in. And in California, which is probably similar to other parts of the country, nearly half the people that are incarcerated here have already served a decade in prison, right? And so when we think about who we were 10 years ago, people can make, transformative changes over a decade, right? And so when you have a prison population where half the people have already served 10 years, again, it gives you an opportunity to really reevaluate the decision that you made and where they are today, and look at that trajectory of change of that individual. I also wanted to name one more thing that's happened here in California, and that is an investment that has happened from the state legislature, from the governor, which was an $18 million investment into this collaborative resentencing model. And so 9 counties in California, prosecutors, defense attorneys, and community-based organizations that do reentry work have been funded to pilot this resentencing work in California. And we're just getting this started, but we hope that this can illustrate and be a sort of roadmap for what other states can do to be able to get the necessary resources to get these collaborative models off the ground. We know that Oregon, and some people are here tuning in today from Oregon, they were also able to get resources to support this reentry work. So if resources is a question for you, just please know that even if you're not able to get an immediate investment from your state, we are available to provide and fill some of those gaps around resources, but there also are some roadmaps for being able to get funding to your jurisdiction, to your county, and through your state. And as Candace said, and as I mentioned earlier, this idea to start this organization to support a couple of offices, right? A couple of offices in California has turned into something bigger than many of us could have imagined. And so you can see here, this is gives you a sort of snapshot into the activity that is happening around the country around prosecutor-initiated resentencing work. So there are 5 states now that have a prosecutor-initiated resentencing law on the books. It's broad, there are no exclusions, and it vests the DA, the prosecutor, the state attorney, the county attorney, the prosecuting agency with the power to bring cases back to court, and then the court is able to reevaluate and determine whether a person can be safely released. You'll see here the plus marks indicate all of the places where legislation has been proposed or is currently being proposed. So this just gives you a little bit of a window. We'll talk about it more on the 28th, but it gives you a window into the activity that is happening now across the country. And last but certainly not least, our work does not end after we pass a law. It does not end after we help a DA office to launch a unit. It doesn't end after we are at a resentencing hearing or at the prison gates, watching people come home and reunite with their families and their communities. But it really is about making sure that these decisions are done in a way that is keeping our community safe. And so many of you, and we wholeheartedly believe that recidivism is the result of reentry structures and supports that aren't available. So we focus a lot on the cases that we support and in the offices that we work with to make sure that there are robust reentry plans for folks. And in addition to that, we are always trying to forge partnerships with organizations that are much more equipped than we are to provide these sort of support systems. So we have a partnership with Silicon Valley Debug and the Participatory Defense Network. We'll drop it in the chat. You should read about this network of organizations that are supporting people through this process and supporting them when they come home. The Anti-Recidivism Coalition that provides transportation so that people's first moments, first 24 hours upon being released is a positive one, and then provide mentorship throughout that reentry process. And then the Center for Employment Opportunity, who we've partnered with, and they are providing stipends and some structures around workforce development to people who are recommended and then released from prison as a part of this program. So these are just a few of the partnerships. If anybody out there listening has ideas for other partnerships, or you are a reentry provider and you would like to reach out to us and partner with us, we are always looking to build upon these structures that we have to make sure that people's reentry is as successful and as seamless as possible. So with that, I am going to take this down. Alrighty. Okay, so I know that I provided a lot of information, but again, I think that it is important to have a backdrop on why prosecutors began to do this work, why our organization started this work in California, and give you a sense of what we're going to cover in more detail on the 28th. So with that, I want to turn to my friend and colleague, DA Reisig, who has been a longtime partner in this work. And he's one of the people that in the beginning, when I was going around and trying to figure out, what could this look like? Will prosecutors do this? Are they interested? Is it the right time? Is this the right tone, right? Really trying to figure all of that out. And so with that, I want to thank you, DA Reisig, Jeff, for being here. So I'm gonna just jump right into this. So as Candace said, you were a prosecutor for a number of years before becoming elected. You have been a prosecutor now for 26 years. And you were a gang prosecutor, right? And sort of renowned in your community as being very good at your job. So I want to ask you, tell us how you went from being a top gang prosecutor, right, to having this view today of wanting to lead this work in the state of California.
Well, I'll just jump in. First of all, good morning from California. Good afternoon to everybody out on the East. Yeah, I've been a prosecutor 26 years now, and I think it's fair to say that I started as a young prosecutor during the tough on crime years. On that graph that you showed, I was a young deputy DA as the incarceration rates were going up, and I certainly was part of that. I didn't send, but I prosecuted a lot of cases, thousands of cases, many very serious crimes where people went to prison for a very long time. And as things evolved, and I'd say when you first approached me, Hillary, in 2018, I was reflecting on a lot of that. And frankly, a lot of the cases where people went to prison for a very long time as a result of sentence enhancements, mandatory sentence enhancements, 3 strikes, et cetera, they stuck in my mind. It wasn't that they were wrongful convictions or that there was something nefarious that resulted in the conviction. They were just really long sentences. And, you know, sitting there in 2018 and sitting here today, I can reflect back on some of the sentences that were handed down by judges 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago. And I can say we wouldn't be looking at the same sentence now. And so it was really just that, first of all, that experience that I've had, and then, you know, maybe at a deeper level, you know, just this idea that as a prosecutor, I believe in accountability and deterrence and second chances. And so when you approached me with this crazy idea of changing the law, which was not a crazy idea, it was a great idea, I was all in because it finally gave me a tool to look back at some of these cases.
So tell me about you. It made sense to you. Did you have any kind of pushback, I guess, from people that were like, wait, what are we doing? Wait, why? How does this work? What, you know, there was, because I certainly felt that, right? A lot of people were kind of scratching their head. I don't understand. This is just kind of not the role of a prosecutor. And so can you tell us about some of those conversations you've had, or how you've been able to help show people that it can also be part of the prosecutor's role?
It's a great question. You know, there's the old saying, you know, do the crime, do the time. And that is something that prosecutors across America, you know, I think many believe, and I believed it. I still believe it, with the caveat that people can redeem themselves and that second chances are absolutely appropriate in appropriate cases. And so, you know, when I first approached this work, and I was an early adopter, as you said, there was a lot of lobbying I had to do with my colleagues to just say, look, we're going to give this a shot. It's the right thing to do. I mean, our job as prosecutors is to seek the truth, keep the public safe, take care of victims of crime, and make sure the sentences are just and that the defendants are treated fairly as well. And so, you know, my approach to it around California, there's 58 counties here, and we have a very diverse group of DAs, is just saying, listen, this is the right thing to do, no matter what side of the aisle you fall on, no matter what your overall perspective is on the system. If people go to prison for a very long time, and now when you're looking at it, it just doesn't seem just, or they've done a great job in rehabilitating themselves and they've earned a second chance, why wouldn't we as prosecutors consider that? It's just the right thing to do.
And that when you talk about rehabilitation and redemption, and what are the kinds of things that that you look for, right? So you've been doing this now, you've worked on several cases, brought lots of people, have now been reunited with their families. What are the kinds of things that you and your office are looking for?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of factors that we are examining in these cases. First of all, what was the crime itself? You know, was it a violent crime? Was it a non-violent crime? How old was the defendant at the time of the crime? Was he or she very young? What was the status of the victim? And I'm going to just tell you now, and I'll tell you again, that the victim's voice in this process really matters to me. And it's a critical consideration is, you know, what were the injuries to the victim? How do they feel now about it? We have conversations with victims. But then also we look at how has the person done since they've been in prison. And, you know, Jose is going to talk in a minute. And, you know, frankly, he kicked ass in prison. He did a good job in choosing a new path and proving to everybody that he deserved a second chance through his rehabilitative efforts, through his attitude, through his, you know, real insight into the crime. And so, you know, I'm going to let him tell you about his story, because I think that Jose is a good example of the kind of person and the kind of situation that we look at and saying, hey, this person has earned a second chance.
Right. And you, right, and we'll hear from Jose shortly. You mentioned victims. One of the questions, that was one of the questions that I got early on, and we continue to get it when we talk to other offices or when we're asked to come and talk to legislators. It's always this question about finality, truth in sentencing, victims, and I try to explain, but I'm going to ask you to explain it because you actually have the job of doing this. But we try to explain, how central victims are to these discussions, and then also the reception that we keep hearing about from victims, that they are oftentimes supportive of the decision. So can you walk us through what your experience has been with victims and some of the kind of surprising things that we've heard from victims along the way?
It's, the most challenging aspect of this approach, this law, to me anyway, and I consider myself, a very victim-driven DA. I care and I don't want to do anything that's going to re-traumatize or re-victimize somebody that has gone through what they've been through. But our experience has been, we have always had conversations with victims about the possibility of asking a judge to resentence somebody. And what I can tell you that in the many cases that we have handled in my county, victims have never disagreed. They've always, once we sat down with them and had a very structured, fully disclosed, fully transparent conversation with them about how the person has done since they've gone to prison, what their rehabilitative efforts have been, what their insight is to the crime, the victims have agreed. So I think that it's very possible to do this work in almost any type of case. And I will say there are types of cases that I will not consider, at least right now. And those are sex crimes and murders. That's just for me right now. But our experience with victims has been that if you give them all the information, you give them some time, and you talk to them about why we're doing this and what the end result we're hoping is, that they're generally on board. And I have not yet had to, as I said, not consider a resentencing petition because the victim said absolutely no way.
Right, right. And what about the judges? We get that question too, that, judges that are, this decision was made 10, 15, 20 years ago, because most of the time with these cases, it goes back to the sentencing judge. And so there'd been concerns that it would go back to the court and the judge would be upset that the case is coming back. Can you share a little bit about the experiences that you've had with the bench?
Sure. So again, this is a system, a process that gives the judge the ultimate authority to resentence or not, right? I mean, the DA is simply bringing the motion and filing the paperwork and petition in support. In my county, we've never had a judge disagree with our assessment. And frankly, almost without exception, every single judge and every single resentencing has felt they've welcomed the opportunity to take another look at the case themselves. They've even said it out loud. Like, I remember sentencing you 20 years ago, and I thought, wow, that was a really lengthy sentence. I'm so glad that you've done well. I'm so glad that I get this opportunity to give you another chance. That's been our experience. And I know that, there may be judges out there that are just not going to go along with it, maybe. But I feel like the facts, if you do your homework, you bring the right cases, and you're prepared, I think the judges typically are going to agree with the DA.
Right. Yeah, I was in one of those hearings, and I remember it was a woman that was being resentenced, and I remember the court saying that, the judge saying that, I'm so glad I have this opportunity to give you this second chance, because it was, all this information about what this woman had done since she had been in prison and how hard she had been working. So I remember that vividly. I wanted to before we bring Jose into the conversation, I wanted to, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, there were innovations and reforms and programs happening in a lot of offices on the front end, right? Diversion programs and different types of sentencing structures, now that we know what we know. And this work is squarely about the work on the back end, right? What is the prosecutor's role? If we learn that somebody's in prison that doesn't need to be there, we feel that that's unjust. Our job is justice, right? And so I'm curious now to kind of take it in almost full circle, right? I think I brought the viewers today how we kind of came from the front and then to the back. But I'm curious about from you, because this process, which we'll get into at the next, we really do spend so much time looking at mitigation factors, what the person experienced in their childhood, what was going on that day when they committed the crime, and everything that they've been doing since. I'm curious about what impact, if any, the work that you've been doing to look back has had an impact on your views of cases that are coming into the justice system, right? New cases that are coming in, charging decisions. Like, can you bring us kind of full circle, right? Because this is what we're all moving towards, right? Prosecution offices are really moving towards this kind of holistic approach, right, to the process, and thinking more broadly and more critically about resources and safety and harm and all of these things. So I'm curious for you, because I know you're just how thoughtful you are about all of these things. Walk us through what impact, if any, this has had for you and your office on some of the front end decisions that are being made.
It's a great point, and it really has been an unexpected benefit of this program of the prosecutor-initiated resentencing, is that we have realized that there are so many factors, and you mentioned some of them, that we in the old days, even just a few years ago, we were not spending a lot of time looking at, what were the trauma factors for this individual, what type of mental health issues do they have going on? What are addiction? I mean, there are just so many things that we are now spending time in the front end really diving into to try and, find the most appropriate path for keeping the public safe, making sure that the victim is made whole, holding the person accountable, but making sure they have a path to not only, being accountable, but having rehabilitation as a viable and a real path ahead. And so it's really changed everything for us in the front end. We spend so much time on every single case now looking at those factors. I didn't expect that to happen when I started this program with you in 2018, but it's been, a major shift.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I think it's always helpful to see how it's just with the mindset of looking back, because I think as prosecutors, what we want, or what I was wanting when I was a prosecutor, was certainty, finality, because we have just a volume of cases coming at us, and it felt like we needed to move through the cases, put them away, and move on to the next one. And so this sort of new kind of way of thinking, where we're everything isn't just final, because people aren't just frozen in time based on one decision at one time. And so I really appreciate you walking us through how this is kind of impacting a lot of different aspects of the way that you're running your office and your team is running the office and you're doing this work. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to ask Jose to join the conversation. And then I'll come back to both of you with a final question. Hi, Jose, Mr. Duran.
Yeah,
It's nice to see you. Nice to see you.
right.
Okay, so thank you for joining us and being here. I know that you're taking time out of your jobs, and so we really appreciate you being here, because your story really illustrates for all the prosecutors that are tuning in today, right? This is a national panel discussion, and we want prosecutors from across the country to really understand the why, and for us, you really represent the why for all of us doing this work. So I am going to kick this off with you and just ask you, when you were released, but before that, what it was like for you to get the news that your case was even being reevaluated or reconsidered. So if you can just walk us through that.
Okay, so first of all, good morning, everybody, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to be here and share my story and take a bit of your time to listen to me. So as I had a life sentence, 28 years to life, and I never gave up hope, to one day coming home. So when this new law came out, I was already on it, because that's what we do in prison. We always keep up with the laws and stuff like that. So I already knew how it worked. So out of nowhere, we contacted my paralegal at that time, Sarah Johnson, from the public defender's office in Yolo County. She's the one that gave me this news. She gave us this news. She said that my case, she had heard my name throughout the offices, the DA's office and the public defender's office, and it's by her saying that I already knew, like, damn, like they finally looking into my case. So I got happy. I got speechless. Like, I don't know what to say when I heard about that. My cellmate, he was next to me. I just looked at him like, I don't know. Like, it was like it was the best feeling I ever felt in my life. So it was just like no emotions, just like, I don't know, no emotions. Just but so yeah, that's how I felt, and it felt really good. It felt good.
And what so you mentioned that it was the public defender reached out to you. Shout out to Sarah Johnson and the team over at the Yolo County Public Defender's Office. Again, it really illustrating the value of this kind of collaborative partnership. How did you feel though, knowing that it was going to be a DA? It was the same DA that prosecuted your case, that asked for the life sentence, was going to be the one that was going back to court and saying, we actually want to undo this sentence and we want Mr. Duran to be released.
So that in itself was humbling, like knowing that somebody really out there that put somebody away for that long, that actually took the time to get him out, that to me, that made me respect him, for changing the way he used to think from how he thinks now. It shows that there is justice in the system, and that's why it motivated me to come out here and help his cause or your cause, like what you guys are doing right now. Like it motivates me to do this even more than what I already want, because I respect you guys and what you guys do for prisoners, and that's how I felt. It was just humbling, a humbling experience to know that there's people out there that really care for people that deserve a chance, a second chance.
Right. Well, and let's not forget, right, that the whole reason was we all looked at your case. Sarah Johnson kept talking about your case. The people in the DA's office they were familiar, and the person that prosecuted your case thought about this case and wondered about whether the sentence was too long and how all of you were doing. And then when we got your case, we got your files, right, and looked through it. It was just this volume of all of this incredible work that you had been doing and how hard you had been fighting to turn your life completely in a new direction. Tell us why, if you were looking at a life sentence, right, at that time, why did you make the decision to turn your life around and go this different direction? You didn't know then that you would be reconsidered or reevaluated. Why did you make these decisions to do that?
Well, there's people in there that kind of were involved in that aspect, because as you know, I went in there as 20 years old guy, and there were older people that are wise in there, that are smart, that are positive, and they talked to me about my life. I sat there and I talked to them about all my experiences. I've been in the system since I was 14 years old. So they see who I was as a person, you know. So when they see somebody that is a good dude or whatever in prison, they encourage him to do good, you know, like they don't really try to deviate him from doing bad, or they don't try to like do all these that people think. They, if they see you want to do good, they encourage that for yourself. You know what I'm saying? So that opened my eyes in a way to where like, man, this ain't who I am, you know, like I want to change and stuff like that. So that's where I started doing a lot of hard work, taking advantage of the resources that the prison system has, you know, the anger management classes, lifers group that deals with all lifers, like, you know, they get together and they share their experiences. And that's another eye opener, because now you got lifers that murder somebody, that did this and that, like crazy crimes, but they get there and share all their personal feelings and all this stuff. So it helps you change as well, you know. So all these things, you know, that I've done, like getting awareness, you know, parental classes, you know, GOGI is like self revaluation and stuff like that. Like all those help me, you know, to be positive and change my thought process, you know, the way I view life now, and the way I view circumstances, people, circumstances, everything, right? So, and on top of that, you know, I want to do it for myself, but then my mom, she's in Mexico at that time when I got arrested for this time, and I haven't seen her since I was 17 years old, and I wanted to get back to her, you know, because she's in Mexico and I haven't seen her 17 years old. So that was a motivation as well. You know, I wanted to get back and hug her one day, you know what I'm saying? So that was like a big thing. And that's pretty much why I changed and why I continue doing the things I'm doing right now, because I want to make her proud and show her that I changed, because that's what she wanted all along, you know. And now she's happy. She tells me when I go out or whatever, like anywhere, like she don't trip no more. She's fine with that. She's
Right,
fine.
right.
Yeah.
And I want to follow up on, you know, what you've been doing since you've been home, and there's lots of hearts and
Mm.
you know, prayer hands in the chat for everything that you're saying. So you mentioned that there were people inside that were mentoring you and you know, seeing that you were going in a different direction, and then just really trying to support that. When you actually learned that you were getting released, were people surprised, or, you know, did you share that, or what kind of reaction did you get from people when they learned that you were getting released? And what kind of feelings did you have leaving, knowing that you were, you know, you were with a lot of people, you said, that were mentoring you, and kind of leaving them behind? So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about those kind of two experiences.
So first of all, like prison, you know, like when you do time and you have these long sentences or laws coming out, you know, so people live with a dream in there, you know, like, oh man, that law is going to apply to me, but it really don't, because again, the system doesn't take the time to give them credit and do things like that. But in their head, they got the credit because they're doing good, you know? So we live in a dream in there, like thinking we're going to get out, thinking, okay, I'm doing good. So that law's going to apply to me, or this and that. So when I was saying that I might have action like getting out, they didn't believe me, because we all live in a dream. We all think we're gonna get out, and we all say, "Oh, I'm gonna get out this night." It never happens. Most of the time, it never happens. It happens, but it never, like what I've seen throughout my 11 years in there, like 80% don't happen and 20% does happen. You know what I'm saying? Something like that.
Mhm.
And so they didn't believe me. So it took for them to believe me. I was in the prison yard one day, and they announced my name in the intercom, calling me to a parole board hearing. And once they do that, that means you're for sure getting out, you know, because they're trying to do the process and that stuff. And that would be for my court date. So I wasn't for sure myself that I was getting out, because now I'm have to deal with the judge, and he can say no, like Jeff Reisig say, it's up to him, you know. And that's when everybody like, damn, they just started shouting. The whole yard like had like 200 more people, like they just started shouting because they all knew me. I spent a lot of time with everybody. So that's when I found out, you know, I'm going home for sure. And that's when they were like, whoa, like he wasn't lying, you know, like he's really going home. So man, I went over there, I got out, and everybody came up to me. I went into that meeting, came out, everybody came up to me, hey, so oh man, like damn, like just that's what's up, this is and that. And then it was lifers too, that many lifers in our yard that they were like, man, bro, like you did that, good shit, good stuff, and good job. And then after that, I went to my cell, and they still came to my cell, and he's like, hey, bro, so what did you do? Like, how that happened? This and that. And I just told him, like, I just programmed, I just did what I had to do, follow the rules. I just did. I went along with the society, like what the prison system requires of us, to do good, and then that's it. And then and do the same. I told them, do the same. That's all you need to do. That's it. And nowadays they will see it. They will see it. It's gonna pay off, because look, it paid off for me. And so that's how me leaving, knowing that now they know that it's real. It can happen. Now it's a real thing. Now there's no more. Oh, I'm living with a dream. Now, if you do good, it's gonna pay off, because all these new things that are coming out, all this new system, that how the system is evolving. It's like it gives me hope for them. Like, for people that are in there.
Right. So let's talk about that, the hope. You'd said this to me before, and we've talked about this before, that you felt that seeing you sort of as an example, kind of like creating the pathway of like this could be something that other folks could take advantage of, right? And giving them hope that there are prosecutors and advocates and family members, right? Because again, even though this is prosecutor-initiated resentencing, there's a lot of people that are going to the DAs and they're raising cases, or even public defenders, right? And the DAs are listening. And so we talked a lot about how the fact that prosecutors are listening and wanting to look back has been kind of reverberating in the prisons. More and more people inside are hearing about that, and it's giving folks hope. I want to now turn to your home now, and you don't have to do anything for anybody else, right? You could just go to work, do your thing, keep it moving. But I want to ask you why and we'll talk about, I know you have several jobs, but one of the jobs you were doing was volunteering, right? Not getting paid, putting hours in to mentor young people. I want to ask you why you've decided to make that commitment now that you've been home, knowing that you don't have to, you know what I mean? You're not trying to earn credits or show anybody you know what I mean? But you still continue to do that. And tell us why.
So doing time in prison for that crime, like, it made me feel like garbage, because the people I victimized, like, there were innocent people that were just minding their own business, and just because I wanted to do that and then stop at that location and did what I did, like, it messed up their whole life. Maybe, who knows? I don't know how they grew up. I don't know how sensitive they were or what they were thinking or not, but it made me feel like garbage, like they didn't even deserve that. You know what I'm saying? So like, I never blame myself, like, or I never blame the system for putting me away, but at the same time, like, it made me a better person, it made me a better person. And then so that's what made me think about what I was doing, too, as well, like the victim. So now that I spend most of my life in the system, I know about the struggle, I know how it feels to get locked up. I know how victims feel. I don't know how they feel because I've never been there, but I imagine how they feel, how, you know what I'm saying? So me coming home, I want to help the kids that might be going that route, and might victimize a person, or might do this. I want to help them learn before. I wish somebody was there to mentor me when I was a kid, I wish somebody was there to guide me and to share what they've been through so I can listen to it, because there was nobody never there for me like that. So now that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to stop them from entering the system instead of them coming home, So I'm starting from the streets and then from prison too. I'm doing both, you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to prevent people from going to prison, and I'm trying to help people that they need to come out, you know what I'm saying? That's what I do, because that's all I know, the system. That's all I know. And it it feels so good to have given a second chance to where like, it's just like something that is like a purpose now for me. It's like, this is what I want to do. This is it makes me feel so good. Like this is what I'm doing right now. This is the best thing I the best feeling since I've been home doing these things. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even think about going out, kicking it, stuff like that, having a good time. Like, this is better than all that, you know? This, me doing this right here, it feels way better than all that. So it's like, because I know when I was in there, you know, like I was wishing on somebody like you guys the whole time, you know. I was like, man, somebody's gonna, that's what I was saying, you know. I had that faith that somebody was gonna look into my case one day, because I didn't kill nobody, I didn't have no weapons, you know. And so I knew that I was gonna get out before the sentence was over, you know. Like, in the back of my head, but at the same time, the system is a certain way to where, like, you never know. And so now I don't want people, I want to help people to I want to be the hope for people, you know. Like, I know a lot of people still in there that they might watch this or see this one day, and they're going to have respect for me because they know I know how they feel, you know. And I'm doing it for them, so that they can be more positive, motivate them, basically give them incentives to do better, like by me being a role model or whatever, you know. Like, just, that's why I do all this, you know, just to help them. Like me, I'm already out, and it keeps me positive at the same time, you know. It keeps me in the right track, and what I want to do is keep me learning new things, you know, everything.
Right. And if anybody meets you, they can see that, right? Because like we've talked about before, you know, you just are like, you are focused on your future. You are focused on helping others. You know, it is very clear when anybody meets you, that you are, you know, you have this endless amount of energy. I don't know how you have, you know, you do it, but you are just this kind of light, for a lot of people. And so, you know, you know, we, lots of people that have been released and are back with their families, right? It is fine to go a path of just kind of putting this all behind them, right? So this is no kind of, you know, criticism or shade to folks that have gone that direction, right? Because they want a new chapter that doesn't have this old chapter even involved. But we do so often, and we talk about this a lot, we often meet people like you, Jose, that come out and their decision is that they're making amends, is something that they're doing through trying to help young people just like them, or they're becoming substance abuse counselors because they want to help folks before that substance use kind of thing gets hold of them and drives them to make, you know, bad choices. So it's just always incredible and inspiring, when we meet people that spend all this time and then are out committing their life and volunteering, right, to do this. I wanted to ask you, what we have today. We have about 100 people that are here listening. I wanted to ask you, what would you say to, well, and for a lot of the people that are here, what would you say to the folks that are here that have family members who are incarcerated and they are trying to support their loved ones? What advice would you give to them?
You know, just stay positive yourself, you know, like that way they can be positive, you know. Don't stress out, because if they stress out, if you stress out, they stress out, you know. Just be positive, be strong for them. Like you're their parent, you know. Like, think about it like that, you know. You got to stay strong for your kids. Just have the mentality, you know, because that's what gets people in prison, you know, when they get stressed out and then they start doing bad or whatever circumstances, you know. So be positive, keep supporting them, love them, show them that you're there, you know, in any way, whatever, financially, emotionally. The smallest things matters in prison, you know. The smallest things, the smallest support you can give them, that matters a lot. And just, if you have somebody that you feel needs to get out and needs to get another chance, help them out, you know. And reach out to organizations, reach out to DA's offices, you know. Help them, be their footstepper out here, because they can't really do it in there, you know. So you got to help them out. You got to put in the work sometimes, and that's your family. I know I would do it for my family, you know. So just keep positive and just be there for them, you know. That's what
and then for the prosecutors, people from across the country that are tuning in today, right? And one of the things I said earlier is that I had a chance, I had gone in to do some like victim, incarcerated person dialogue, you know, the circles that they have inside some of the prisons out here in California and possibly other prisons as well. I got to meet a bunch of people and it was very clear to me, there's so many people inside that need to be there. What would you say to some of the prosecutors that are tuning in today that are thinking about this work? What advice would you give to them in starting a unit or an initiative like this?
I think that'd be awesome because in life, you know, people need motivation for things, you know, like people, anybody, not just prisoners, anybody needs motivation, you know, girls, boys, kids, they all need a motivation to change, you know, and advancement, you know, to advance in life, you know, you need a motivation, you need some purpose, you know. So a lot of people in prison, they grew up with a messed up background, you know, like people, their father and mother, you know, on drugs, they probably died, you know. You never know how they grew up, so you gotta consider all those things, you know, like how they grew up and why they're making the choices they're making. But when you give them a motivation, like an incentive, like these new laws, you know, now it opens their eyes, you know, that opens their eyes, and you believing in those people, it creates a chain reaction, you know, like other people start feeling each other, you know, like because I know it has, like when I was in there, that's why all those people came up to me, you know, because now they have them like, man, like the system's not so bad, and because that's what people think, the system is the worst, you know. So now that all the changes are happening, they realize that, you know, like things are changing, so it makes them change just automatically, you know what I'm saying, because it has happening. And by other DAs joining this movement and setting it up in their counties, you know, it's like it's going to create that process, you know. It's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going, and it's going to keep going. So you got to take a risk, you know, like if you don't think it's going to work, you have to try it, because look, I'm a living example that is working, you know. I'm out here doing all this and all that. So now you're seeing it. You're seeing it. It's not a matter of what if. This, like, you're seeing it. I'm here talking to you guys, taking the time, you know, to hopefully, you know, change your mind and give you a different side of your view, your perspective of how we are or we used to be. And I just hope that you can do that. You know, there's ways in prison, you know, like it's hard for people to stay and doing positive and doing good, because there's depression, there's anxiety, there's trauma, there's all these things in there, there's stress, there's just many things that can always, like, can keep your mind off focus, you know. Like for me, it took a lot of discipline to keep doing positive in there, because I'm around all kinds of different people, different mentalities, different backgrounds, like I said. And one person might be good and another person might be this, you know. It's like, it takes discipline. It's all your self-discipline. It's your so now you can see that they're doing good and who's doing bad, you know, who's doing this and that. So it's easy to just say, okay, that guy right there, his case is this. The factors, like Jeff Reisig was saying, you know, the factors, you know, to this time, you know, let's weigh it out, and okay, let's look at his rehabilitation, what he was done. So if they're doing that, if they rehabilitated themselves in there, and they're really staying away from 115s, you know, write-ups and stuff like that, from any disciplinary action, that shows you that they're changing, you know, that they change. So it's just like, you have to look at all those things, you know, and not just go with people's opinions. Though you can look at facts, you know. There's facts, and statistics and all that stuff. So it's easy because prison is hard to stay focused, you know. It's hard to stay positive. It takes a lot of discipline. So the people that are being focused, you know, they stand out. And like Jeff Reisig said, you know, I stood out, and it's just look at all that, and you'll be fine, you know. And yeah, that's all I can think of saying about that, you know.
Right. No, I mean, that's exactly right. It sounds like there's in looking back, there's a lot to look for and consider, and the kind of choices will become clearer, and that doing this work can really incentivize and give people hope, right? So that kind of the 80% of people that are hopeful for one day getting resentenced, that are putting all this hard work in, maybe we can change those numbers. So thank you so much for that. We are going to now do a quick poll that Candace has, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience for Jeff and Jose.
Yes, we are going to launch a CLE poll now. Courtney's going to do that for me. For those of you who are attorneys, this is going to go on for just 60 seconds. The answer to the question is people. The answer to the question is people. So if you guys respond, Courtney keeps a log of this for those of you who are attorneys. If your state bars contact us, we can let them know that you were participating in this training. So it's spontaneous. We do it at different times. The correct answer is people, just in case somebody went to drink a cup of coffee and we missed you. I see, or there's a chat from Britta. We will be sure to save your message as well, Britta. So this log is saved. We'll know that you're participating. There are just a few more people, and let's see. Oh, everyone has answered. I think we can close, Courtney. All right. 100% have answered. All right, we can close up, and then that way you guys we can give the floor back over to our panel. Thank you for the interruption.
Thank you, Candace, for that. I know we want to make sure people get their CLE credits and so forth. So we have a lot of questions, and we had people from our team trying to answer as many as we could, and then also putting some resources in the chat, knowing that we wouldn't be able to get to everything, but we tried to go through and pull out some questions that we saw a couple times over and over. So thank you for all of the questions that came in. One of the questions that came for you, Jose, is that what reentry support did you have? What did you find to be the most helpful? And what did you find that is still continuing to be challenging?
Okay, so coming home, to be honest, like the pro system wasn't too helpful. I had to stay away from that and go the routes. CEO was helpful. CEO was really helpful. They're the ones that I met a lady here, a CEO. I started getting in contact with her, and she started like linking me up with people, like other people that help people. So that's how it came about the housing that I have right now. And then another program that helped me was SARD, self-awareness rehabilitation in South Sacramento. That's who I work for, to mentor the kids, stuff like that. They help people, like get jobs. They help people go to DMV, get their license, get their, things like that that you think they're normal, but to people incarcerated is not. They get lost when they come outside, come out. That's the stuff. The another source that helped me a lot was the money that I was giving for the people in CEO. I think that's what it is, and then and that helped me, because when I came out, my family they're in Mexico, so I came out, and then I had to move in with my cousin, but I had to pay rent coming as soon as I got out, so that helped me pay rent, and then it's just things like community resources, community resources that help you that help you better to help you get more established. Those are the things that help me a lot.
Thank you for sharing that. And then this question is for Jeff. Is there a difference between so in California we have the prison can make recommendations also for cases under exceptional conduct, the statute we have here. Is there a difference between whether the prison is making a recommendation or the DA is making a recommendation? How do you handle when kind of requests are coming from different actors in the justice system? How do you kind of handle that?
Well, there's definitely a difference. And what's great about prosecutor-initiated resentencing petitions is, we have a unique relationship with the victims in the crime. And I would say that, a lot of times when the petitions come in from the prison directly, we always are a little bit guarded because our experience, and I'm just going to be candid, I don't think the prison system has the same concerns or the same connections that we do with our community and with the victims. And so we look at them and we do our due diligence in looking at them before we oppose or support. But our experience has been the prosecutor-initiated approach is much more appropriate for us, for the DAs. I mean, we have a different role, and make no mistake about it, right? I mean, my job is to represent the people, and we prosecute thousands of cases every year. But when we get righteous cases like Jose's, it was, one of the greatest parts about being a prosecutor is not only obtaining justice for the communities and the victims, but then seeing people like Jose who turn it around and come back to our community and just do so well. It's really awesome. And, I really would say to any prosecutor out there who's considering doing this work, just take a look. I mean, you're not forced to do anything, but I would guarantee every prosecutor out there has a few cases that if they really dived into it, they would find some real justification to ask a judge to take a second look.
Right. Right. And I want to follow up. We have another question, and I guess we can both speak to this. I get this question a lot, that we're seeing a lot in the news about crime, increases in crime, concerns about crime, right? And so, there's been disagreements whether crime is going up or whether it's just violent crime or where it's going up. But the fact of the matter is that there's a feeling that crime is on the rise. And so one of the things that you and I have talked about, and we've talked about this with other offices, is that the work of prosecutor-initiated resentencing is done in this very kind of thorough, methodical way where the whole entire cases are evaluated and mitigating circumstances are taken under consideration. And so we've typically tried to explain to both people in the community that ask questions about this work and crime, or people that are doing stories on this, that it both need to be taken into consideration, right? We don't want to discount how people feel about the crime or safety. And at the same time, there are all these people in prison like Jose, who have done all of this work and can actually be safely released, right? And when they're released, right, we're seeing this kind of other unexpected benefit for public safety, which are people like Jose and others that are then coming home and then investing their time into, deterring crime, helping young people make better choices and so forth. So, your work, Jeff, hasn't slowed down or changed. You have been consistently moving forward with cases. You have a unit. Can you tell us, how you, I know you get these questions too, right? How you're handling the kind of perception or concerns around crime and then still continuing to move your unit and move this case review forward?
It's a great question. And, I'm one of those people that I believe that there's a crime increase going on, certainly in California, in my own community. I mean, the data is there, and it's more than just a perception to me. So I'm concerned about it, but that doesn't change the fact that there are people like Jose, many people like Jose, that still deserve a look and maybe a second chance. And communicating that to the voters, and I say voters because I'm an elected official. And I mean, make no mistake about it, every DA, every state's attorney, every solicitor, part of the process that they have going on in their mind, I'm sure, is if I make a bad decision, I'm going to get fired. But, I think at the end of the day, being a good prosecutor is just about making sure that we are always pursuing justice. This is part of the law in California. It's part of our duty. And I think to answer your question, really clearly. I'm strategic. We look at the cases that I think are appropriate, but not outside the bounds of what I consider reasonable. I told you, we don't look at rape, child molest, murders, and I probably never will as long as I'm the DA. Every DA gets to make their own decision on that.
And well, thank you for speaking to that. I want to ask you, Jose, another question about, there was a question that came up that was about, you talk about discipline,
Yeah.
And staying the course while you were incarcerated. Do you have any helpful advice around what it took for you to stay as disciplined as you were, again, knowing that, or hoping you were going to be getting out before the sentence, but not knowing if you would? Any advice around that?
Well, my mentality with that was that I was living day by day, like just following what I had to do, like if I don't do this, I'm gonna get in trouble for that. If I don't do, just thinking like that, I just gotta have respect for the CEOs, and they're gonna have respect for me, and make their job harder. That was the discipline that you gotta, because you got CEOs that they're not so good, and they always like to mess with you, things like that. So it's like I didn't let none of that get to me. I just follow the rules, I just follow the rules. I never gave up to where like, man, this is my life now, so I might as well just do what I gotta do in here, and then just, who cares about the consequences? I never thought like that. I've always been a positive person, but I just never was able to apply it and really evaluate myself and know that how I used to think I was, that wasn't me, So it took for me to do time, to find out who I really was, and then I just stayed that course. I realized, this is my life. That's not what I want, and I just kept following the rules, like, just because I already knew that by following the rules, that's how you get somewhere. You're gonna get out of there. You know what I'm saying? So you're not gonna make it hard for the system to, okay, yeah, let him out, or things like that. And that's how. And that's my thought about that. You know what I'm saying? So that was my discipline. I just kept that same mentality. Yeah.
Right. Well, we're at time right now. And so I really want to just thank both of you for taking time out of your day, for always, Jeff, always being willing to answer any question, right? Because we don't have, it's not scripted, and your candor in talking about the work. And I know that we had more questions that we weren't able to get to, but we want to be available if people want to reach out to us and ask some more of the questions. One of the questions that we didn't get to is, for people that are tuning in that are community leaders or community members, what's the best way for them to lift up a case? I will say that we've seen it happen. They've gone to the public defender's office, or some have asked to meet with their elected DA. I know that lots, at least here in California and other offices where we're working, are hosting kind of town halls and meetings to hear from constituents, right, about what their hopes are from their elected. So again, if we didn't get to your question, I apologize, and we will try to respond to inquiries that come in. But I want to just end on the note of what Jose has said, which is he's the why. He's the why of doing this work. He is certainly worked hard and is disciplined, but he is not unique in that there are so many other people in prison that deserve to have their cases looked back upon, and could be home and reunited with their families and communities, and making these commitments like Jose is making, to be a public safety resource for us. And that's ultimately what the prosecutor's job is. So thank you so much to the NDAA for inviting us to be here, opening it up to this broader group of attendees. Thank you to Jeff, to Jose, and I will turn it back to you, Candace, to close us out.
You're muted, Candace.
Well, there we go. Now we can hear. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We really do appreciate you taking out the time to have these conversations. And do not be remiss in reaching out. As Hillary said, reach out to them, talk to them. They're really available to answer any questions that you have. Reach out to Courtney, Jan, if you have any questions with regard to CLE, and hope we will see you at some upcoming NDAA programs, and certainly hope that you'll be with us in September for part 2 of this, where you will be getting a packet of information so you can start progress in your own communities. Thanks again. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe.